Hello and welcome to another episode of Unlock the CPA Exam Show. In this show, you will get the tips, tricks, and advice to help you pass the CPA exam on your first try and become the most trusted professionals in the world, CPAs. This is your host, Ala'a Abu Dayyeh, and today we have with us Amber Setter. Amber is an executive leadership coach with Intent to Lead, a leadership development firm that coaches CPAs to access the dimension of possible, the place where fear is no longer the enemy and love reigns. Amber is a CPA exam expert who has successfully coached struggling candidates who thought passing the CPA exam was an impossible goal. She is a CPA and an international coach, Federation Professional Certified Coach. Amber holds a master's in leadership studies from the University of San Diego and a bachelor's in accounting from San Jose State University. She has published numerous articles about the CPA exam on the going concern and also for the California Society of CPAs and Quest magazines. Well, thank you, Amber, for being with us today, and thank you for giving us some of your time to give us the tips and advice and motivation for our CPA exam candidates.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. I think it's wonderful that you're reaching out so broadly to help people, and I'm excited to be part of the conversation.
Thank you. So can you just tell us a bit about your background and how you arrived in your current role?
Yeah, so I started off, I did my undergraduate degree in accounting, and when I graduated, it was the first time that you actually needed to have a college degree, evidence of that in California. So as your listeners might know, or the watchers, there's different rules for all the different states and jurisdictions. And so I was kind of coming into the CPA world when there's a lot of changes going on with the CPA exam. But what's different about my career path in terms of the CPA, or makes it a little bit unique, is I worked 2 busy seasons in accounting, and I realized, like, this is not my jam. I'm not the strongest when it comes to the numbers. I can do it. I'm smart enough. I got the degree, but I'm really good at developing people. Like, that's my sweet spot. In fact, when I went through college to pay my way, I was a nanny and taking care of children. Like, I just always loved nurturing and growing people. So very quickly realized I didn't want to do the technical part of accounting, but I stayed in working in a public accounting firm. I was actually there for 10 years. So in my time, I spent like I said, I started off, I did some tax work there. Then I shifted into being a campus recruiter. So going out and talking to students and hiring students and helping them choose what would be the right firm and career path in the firm. And then I decided to go back to school to get my master's in leadership studies. And that was a real awakening, because I saw there was a lot of things that would help people to grow them as individuals, to understand organizational culture, and that we could develop the whole person, not just the technical. That's important. You need to know your technicals, but you also need to know the softer skills that come with the profession. And so that's where I really spent the bulk of my career. I was a learning, and my next role at that same organization was a learning and people development manager. So making sure everybody got their license and then maintain their license through their continuing education and whatever skills they might need to do their job. And then I got a crazy idea after I hadn't been doing accounting work for 7 years. I decided that I still wanted to become a CPA. So I can tell you, I did the very last paper exam where we sat for 2 days straight and you took all 4 sections at one time, and I failed all of them. 7 years later, I decided I still wanted to do the exam. Like, if I had the CPA designation, I could have more influence in the profession. I could be more valuable. I could sit on committees. Because what was happening was we were actually coming in California to the 150-hour rule and looking at, well, what should qualify and what shouldn't. And I had strong opinions. I want the non-technical to qualify, but I couldn't be part of that conversation because I wasn't yet a CPA. So that was the inspiration, actually, was to do the exam. So 7 years later, I did it. I've done the computerized exam. It took me 7 attempts. So I passed all 4 in 18 months by the skin of my teeth, failed 3 along the way, really struggled. But, I really think we were initially talking, like I really struggled with it. And now I'm really passionate about helping other people. So my latest adventure in my career is being a professional coach. I help people early in their career becoming licensed. I do all kinds of things. If somebody wants to get promoted, be more effective as a leader, break out on their own and do their own accounting business or different things that they're up to, or they need help with something specific, like I want to get better at sales and how do I sell? I help with those things. So that's the role of a professional executive coach.
Well, that's great. Really, I really love your story, and it's really full of struggles, but it shows how much you are really you kept on going after your goal until you really made it. And it really, I love your story, really. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, do you think becoming a CPA is an important step in the life of any accountant, and why? Like, does CPA really make a difference in the lives of people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I see 2 places that it's really valuable. Number one is the credibility, look at, you're in a totally different part of the world and you're helping people in their journey, and where you're at, I mean, it's even valuable there. So while it might be like a US designation, it has a broad reach into the value of and the significance to it. And when people, it's interesting because I'm also certified as a coach. So the coaching profession is pretty new. And when I tell people, they don't even know what a coach is. They don't know what like the process to become a coach, any of that. And when you say CPA, people really understand. Now, they might not know if you do audit or tax, but what they do know is that you're intelligent, you're committed, like there's a lot that goes into it to pass, and it's a very regulated profession. So it brings a lot of prestige and a lot of trust, because when people hear that designation, they know it comes with a lot. So that, I think, is an important piece. The other is just really the personal journey and the learning that people go through to make it happen. I think every CPA will tell you, like, it was a really hard experience for them. Yeah, mine had like a 7-year gap, and it was unique, but everyone makes a huge personal sacrifice for it. It's literally like a part-time job, and oftentimes people have a full-time job while they're doing it. And so you learn a lot. You learn about time management. You learn about asking for what you need, whether, it's at home, like someone make me dinner and help me out, or at the workplace, like, I'd love to help with this project, but I need to get my study hours in because my greater commitment to my career is this long-term thing, and that's hard to say sometimes no to the short term, but I believe in it. I think it's really important. I didn't do my CPA so that I could have more credibility as an accountant. I did it, for credibility, and it gave me lots of that. I'd never go back and change it. Although it was very rigorous and challenging, I still wouldn't change it.
Yeah, great. That's really very motivational. And, determining the why is a very important step for the people to pass the CPA exam and to stay motivated for studying. So the things you told us now about the benefits of becoming a CPA, I am sure, like, after CPA exam candidates hear these benefits, they will go ahead immediately and be motivated to study for the CPA exam, which is awesome. Really. Yeah, great. Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned that, the why. As a coach, I think it's such a critical piece, because sometimes people think like the why is, well, my professor said it was a good idea, or my parents think it's a good idea, or my company thinks it's a good idea. And it's such a critical piece for a person to know why it's important to them. So all of those other things are important, but really getting present to, like, why someday it's going to create stability in my life, and I'm going to be able to earn more. And when I earn more, I'm going to, buy a home for my family, or I'm going to travel. You really need to think about the why for you. And so for anybody listening or watching, like, that is a critical piece, the why for in your own heart, because that's, I think sometimes a missing step, because other people tell you it's a great idea, and it is, but you got to understand it for you.
Exactly, exactly. It's something for you. At the end, you are the one who benefits from all this investment and effort and time. So really, it's very important to determine the why. Great, yeah. So what is your best tip for passing the CPA exam on the first try?
Yeah, so I can't just narrow it down to one. I want to go back to understanding your why. I think that's really important. I think the other piece where I see people struggle is in designing a very realistic schedule. And so oftentimes we go, I sit there and I partner with people. I tell them, take your first shot, like map out your study schedule. If the AICPA says it takes 100 hours, what's that going to look like? How are you going to map out the 100 hours? And then I'm just professional skeptic. I try to poke holes in all the ways of thinking with the schedule, because what I notice is people are just too optimistic, right? So they're planning as if life's not going to happen. You're not going to get sick. You're not going to have a big project unexpectedly come up at work. You're not maybe going to struggle with a chapter. And so that's where it's like, I would encourage people to, I'm actually quite an optimist. I see the glass as being more full than empty, but when it comes to the exam, like, plan for the unexpected. Just know that when you're studying over a period of 18 months, things are going to happen in life. And that window, that time period, that clock still ticks. It doesn't go on pause because, you were sick for a week or whatever happened. So I think that being very sort of realistic in the planning is an important piece.
Great, yeah. And what is your advice for candidates to remove the study stress and, stay motivated for studying too?
Yeah, so one is I want to say that stress is totally normal, right? Like, everybody has it. And if you notice that you're stressed or you're overwhelmed, don't be down on yourself. It's a big exam. And some of the things that I see for people is they've made big choices in life. Like, they've decided to go for that extra education, a fifth year. Maybe they chose a major. They went for 20% more school, 20% more debt. And they're like, why am I doing this? You kind of get maybe overwhelmed. And so it comes with a lot. So one is, I just want to say, is it's normal to have those feelings. Secondarily is that it's really important, and I know from my own journey of not doing so great at it, but to help your stress, it's really important to take care of yourself, right? So things like taking care of yourself, we think maybe physically is important. So eating well, getting enough sleep, taking brain breaks. Like, the human brain isn't a computer that can run all hours of the day. You restart your computer maybe once a month, and there's all these applications. Like, that's not an optimal way for the human brain to work. And you're taking an exam that really requires, like, to unleash all your technical performance. So think about how exercise is actually an investing activity, that maybe you're investing an hour, but it's going to pay you interest and dividends. You're going to think better. You're going to think more clearly. You're going to perform better on the exam. So that is critical. I also feel like other things, like, your emotional energy, like time with friends, doing things and being with things that nurture you. Those are also things that are very, very important, that help you stay afloat. So I would just, at the bottom line, saying know that you might have kind of downward thoughts, and that's okay. But to buoy yourself up by taking care of yourself, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually.
Yeah, exactly. And like, how can the CPA candidates maintain the balance between, like, studying and their social life? Is there any way or something they can do?
Yeah, so what I like to tell people is I tell people what really worked for me. And then, also knowing like each person is unique and that they're going to need to modify something like this that really works for them. So for me, what worked really well, and I was taking the exam when I was working full time. So I told myself Monday through Friday, my commitment is I'm studying a minimum of 4 days and I'm going to take 1 day off a week. And I would let myself choose whatever day that was. Maybe I had friends that wanted to go to dinner on a Thursday. That would be my night off. Or come Monday, I studied on the weekend. I was so tired. I needed that Monday off. So again, I told myself Monday through Friday, I'm going to study for 4 hours. And whether I studied 2 or 3 or 4 depended on what section I was taking and how many hours total I was trying to get in. And then what I did was I studied also on the weekends, and I would study like 4 or 5 hours on both Saturday and Sunday. And that was great because I was still able to sleep in. If I wanted to exercise, I wanted to go to dinner, I could do that. Initially, what I tried to do was just study like 8 hours on Saturday and nothing on Sunday, but it was diminishing returns. Like after 4 or 5 hours, I wasn't retaining the information, and I knew that about myself, so I had to switch it. But that's different. Like some people that I coach, they're like, I do better when I do 8 hours because I just focus and I'm in the zone. So, I think it's really being honest with yourself about what works for you and how do you, find a structure that's going to work.
Yeah, great. Yeah, very helpful, really. So, is there any specific order to take the exams that you usually recommend your students to do, or it doesn't matter?
There's two approaches in this. So there's either take what is going to be easiest for you if you need to get confidence. So for anybody that's maybe failing, or there's a gap between their accounting classes and taking the exam and they're kind of feeling rusty to studying, I would say take something that's going to give you some confidence. And confidence could come from doing a smaller section like BEC, or it could be along the lines of maybe you just took an audit class or you work in audit area and so you're more familiar. The other school of thought is to take the one that's going to be hardest, because as soon as you pass that, or the date that you took the exam is when your 18-month window starts. So if you get the harder one out of the way, your clock starts ticking and you've got that one down. So it's a personal preference, but that's what I'd say is kind of think like, do I want the easier one to gain the confidence, or do I want to really take on that harder one that I know is going to be a big challenge for me? And oftentimes for people, it's financial, just because it's so vast. There's so much content in it. That tends to be a harder one for people.
Yeah, the FAR is usually people find it the most biggest part, and the most difficult for them. So they usually, a lot of people, I find them, they begin with the FAR, but it depends on their approach, as you said. Yeah, exactly. Concerning the BEC, can you give us some tips for the communication questions?
Oh, what could the tips for communication questions? It's really about your writing. And so I know for me, what helps me with writing is to actually stop and read things out loud, which might kind of feel like in the testing center, you might not want to do too much because other people are going to be in there, taking a variety of exams. But to the extent you can, of like actually slowing things down and reading it, and instead of reading it like line by line in a paragraph, start at the end, read your last sentence first, and then your sentence before that, because then your brain's not on autopilot. You're actually stopping and able to see each sentence stand alone. So those would be some things that I would recommend for that.
Great, very helpful, really. So what are your day of the exam advice and tips you would like to give the CPA exam candidates?
Yeah, so even before the exam, so like the day leading up to it, I think number one is just to know, like, is your brain going to be better off just taking a break, like taking the day before completely off? So you come in, think about like an Olympic athlete, like if they're marathon runners, they're probably not going to run a marathon the day before. They're going to have a day of rest. So you might consider if a day of rest would help you. If it's too stressful, I don't want to create stress, but just consider that might be helpful. Day of, I think number one is like looking at, well, the scheduling piece. You know, if you are a person that does better in the morning versus at night, to think about that, what time slot can you get, and to know that time slots, you know, book them as far as you can in advance. But the other piece with day of is give yourself ample time to get there. I once was working with a woman who went and drove to the testing center, showed up, and when she got there, found out that the testing center had actually moved. And so, you know, there wasn't like an email that said, hey, we've moved, but when she had her, you know, all of her paperwork, it had a new address, but she'd gone to the testing center so many times, she didn't pay attention to the address. So it's just like an example of like, just it's better to be early and like sit in your car and meditate or breathe or listen to music, like, and just be there so that you don't have that day of stress or that morning of stress. The other, it's just, and then it's contextual. What might you need? Like, this is silly stuff, but it was important to me. Dressing in layers. I never knew if the testing center was going to be cold or it was going to be hot. I didn't want to, you know, worry about that. I get nervous and I'm not really hungry, but then halfway through the exam, I'd be hungry. So I'd have a snack in my locker. You know, those things are important. Another piece that's important is when you sit down for the exam to write out your time budget. So if you know, like, you know, you have 4 hours, there's going to be 3 multiple choice testlets and 2 areas of your simulations. Write down, like, you know, the clock counts down backwards. So, you know, at 3 hours and 15 minutes, I need to have made it through testlet 1 of my multiple choice. At 2 hours and 45, it should look like this. Then when you're in a multiple choice testlet, as you're, you know, you may or may not know, depending on if you've done exams yet, when you're in the multiple choice in a testlet, you can go back and forth to those questions, but once you move to the next testlet, you can't go back. So why is this important? If you have your time budget, what happens when you're taking multiple choice is a couple things. One is the exam, they intentionally have what they call test questions in there. So you're going to get questions that seem out of left field. You're like, I've never seen this before. What is this? Well, maybe they're just testing out a new question and it actually isn't even a count towards your points, but it's something that they're doing to enhance the exam. So if you get a question that feels out of left field, as our expression, don't stress out about it. Just, you know, mark C for cat and go on. Like, just what's your automatic? I'm making a wild guess. I have no idea. And I'm not emotionally going to let this take me out of the game. The other thing is if you do a calculation and you spend 5 minutes and you calculate it out and, you know, you think your answer is 100 and you see from A, B, C, and D, that option's not there. Don't get upset. And I tell people, just mark your same, like maybe it's D for dog, mark it, go on. And if you still have time in your testlet, then go back and calculate it. Do that like after you've had a 5-minute break. Start it from scratch, from new, versus trying to figure out where your error is. So those are some tips that have really been helpful for me in my own process.
Yeah, great. These are very helpful tips. And like for me personally, one of the big things that one of the mistakes I used to do in the exam was the multiple choice specifically was like sometimes I used to keep on changing my answer. So first I put A, then I think about it, I say no, it's wrong, it should be B. So what's your advice here, like for people who keep on changing their answers?
I love that question, because that's another thing that I learned to do is, so when you first sit down to the exam, you're going to have to answer some general questions. Like, I promise it's me. I promise I'm not cheating. And you have an allotment of time to do that, to go through these things. And I don't know, like every time, I don't always read the terms of agreement. You know, I don't read it line by line and detail by detail when Apple's, you know, doing an upgrade to my phone. My point of this is, with that time that you have, I actually sit down and I make notes. When my brain is fresh, before I've even seen any questions, I write down the formulas that I know. I write down the mnemonics that I remember. So essentially, I'm making my own little cheat sheet. And that would really help me, because you're right. You get into the exam and you're crunching and your brain gets tired and you're stressed and you're like, wait, is it this or is it that? And sometimes just by going back and referring to my own notes, you know, like, oh, if ending inventory goes up, well, what happens to, you know, cost of goods sold and income and taxes? I would just have all my arrows and my directions. So with a fresh brain, I wrote things down when I really knew them. And that really helped me from those moments of second guessing myself.
Yeah, that really helps. And it also helps increase the score. Like it can add some more scores to your exam, which may be a reason for you to pass the exam. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. I've got a 74. So anything you can do, you know, one question makes a big difference.
And what about the task-based simulations? Like, do you have any advice about them, especially that they are big and they are time consuming. So can you give us any tips about them?
Yeah, so, you know, that's where we, as you said, they're time consuming. So it is important to have your time budget and make sure that you, when you get to that, you've allotted and sort of budgeted for that time. The other thing that again, it's personal preference, but what I would do is I would go in there. So when you get into a task-based simulation, there's all different little things that you can do, sort of little mini projects or problems that you're going to work on. And I just tabbed through them all and I said, okay, what's on here? And I went with the stuff that I knew. I'm like, I'm going to invest my energy in the stuff that I feel like I'm really comfortable with, and I'm going to go and try to do those. Another thing that helped me is if you have research. So there is a research component to it, which has sort of pretend authoritative literature. But I remember once like feeling like I had to do some calculations on some formulas and I didn't know them. And I just went to the research and I kind of read some of what, you know, the rules said, and it didn't give me the exact answer, but it jogged my memory enough to like get the information to come back to me. So think about that little research function as it might have, you know, something that helps remind you of some of the content that you studied, but maybe it's been a while since you saw it.
Yeah, that's very helpful, really. Yeah. So do you recommend the candidates to take the break during the exam?
So I've heard now that you actually can take a break to use the restroom, like that you can stop and take a break, which is new because that used to be when I took the exam. I sound like one of the old people, but that's what we do. You didn't even get a biological break. You had 4 hours and that was like 4 hours. You have to use the restroom. You do that on your own time. I think there's real value to taking a break. There's in fact studies and research in neuroscience, which how does the brain work optimally? And it says that we should have 90 minutes of focus time and then take a brain break. 90 minutes of focus time and then take a brain break. So even if you don't need to use the restroom, but you have that space, I would say stop, walk around, take your break if you can, and then come back. It's good for your brain to have a rest.
Great, yeah. Really, it's a good opportunity for them to rest because, as you said, a long time ago or before a couple of years, the break counted from the exam time. But nowadays, there is a 15-minute break, which is, I think, after test book number 3, that does not count from the exam time, which is awesome. Like it's something really great for the candidates to refresh their minds and rest a bit. Yeah, great.
Yeah. So there's actually a concept. I teach in addition to doing coaching, and I took a class all about learning, like how do adults learn? And there's a concept, it's called integrative learning. And integrative learning is what happens when you step away from the problem. So like people who work in public accounting, they joke like, should I bill my time for when I'm in the shower, or in my exercise class? Because that's when you've been trying to solve a problem, and you step away from the problem and you're not so pressured and focused, and that's where the best ideas, that's where everything sort of comes together. So that's another reason for taking that 15 minutes is like you just give your brain a rest, but you might have some insights. You might have some like, oh, that's that part of it, and the wheels are turning, and it actually is helpful. There's a quote by Albert Einstein that says, I think 99 problems or 99 times and I don't get anything, and I stop thinking and then I solve the problem. So
Wow.
Integrative learning.
Really, yeah, that's really great. Yeah. So, what is your advice for candidates who failed the CPA exam once or even more, and how can they overcome this, this pain of failure?
Yeah, great question. So first and foremost, failure is normal. The NASBA, the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, publishes candidate performance handbooks. You actually have to buy them. I never really want to buy them, but I have friends at NASBA that I would say, hey, tell me about someone's statistics. So statistically, it is more common that somebody's going to fail a section than pass all four. So I think this is a big area, though, where people really struggle, because usually people that choose accounting and choose to become a CPA, goal-oriented, set a goal and achieve it. So they're not practiced at ever failing something, and they fail one exam and it's like, the world comes crashing down. So first and foremost, failure, you don't want to do it, but it's normal. So if it happens, don't kind of go down the hole of I'm a failure. It's okay. Like lots of people fail one or two, and you just got to kind of get back up on the horse and continue to study. The other part of it is whether you're struggling with the exam or anything, I think it's like looking at what are the gifts of the experience. So there's an author, his name is Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a pretty spiritual person. He's written a few books like The Power of Now. But he talks about, he says, life will give you whatever experience you need to elevate your consciousness. How do you know you need to have an experience? Because that's the one you're having right now. And so what I see for people with the exam is, yeah, you're learning accounting principles and you're learning topics, but you're also learning life lessons. You're learning about how do I delegate at work? How do I take care of myself under times of massive stress? How do I ask others to support me, whether it's I need, to not work at extended hours at work, or I need, like I said, somebody in my family to cook me a meal. So there's other learning that happens. So I would say, if you fail, well, what are the gifts in the failure? And I know it might not feel good. You might not be able to see it as easily, but if you really look, there's some real good learning that's coming from it, beyond the accounting topics.
Yeah. So, the key is using this failure to build success on this failure and learn from your mistakes. These are the people who will be successful in their life, because actually all of us failed, and no one of us becomes successful in one day. We face a lot of failures in our life, but we overcome these failures, we learn from our mistakes, and we go ahead until we get our goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that sometimes the bigger the failure or the deeper down, it's like the higher we climb, we learn more about ourselves. And, the genesis of this YouTube channel you've created, if you would have passed the exam and have no problem, it wouldn't be here, right? You learned a lot, and you were inspired to share with others and help others. And so that was the journey for you that has you contribute in a way that's much greater than your personal experience with the CPA exam.
Yeah, exactly. So is there any specific time or best time you recommend candidates to begin studying for their exam?
Yeah, so it's definitely back to the NASBA's candidate performance handbook. The sooner you do the exam out of your coursework, the better. That's because the topics are fresher in your mind. You've seen them. They're not, years away. And another reason for that is as our life progresses or our career, we get more responsibility in the workplace, more responsibility with life. People get married, have children. That makes it harder, not impossible. I've coached people who have children and they still find the time, right? So definitely though, the sooner you do it, the better. And that's not just me, my big ideas. It's based on the data of all the candidates and, seeing the results, how soon after college they did it, the sooner after, the higher their performance.
Great. Very helpful, really.
Yeah.
So we have a few moments left for this interview, and I would like to tell the audience that you have offered them a free gift. So can you just tell us a bit about your guests?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, as you said at the introduction, I partner with Intend to Lead, and we're a leadership development firm specific for accountants. And so how you came to know of us is we have a program for coaching people to pass the CPA exam. So it's nothing about the technical, it's all about the non-technical, coming up with that realistic schedule. What do you do if you failed? How do you leave past performance in the past? How do you manage your boundaries and take care of yourself? So we have that program, but in terms of the free offering, go to our website. It's www.intend, and then the number 2, intendtolead.com, and you can subscribe for our monthly newsletter. And why that's important, it's all topics that we do related to helping accountants thrive in the workplace. So sometimes the articles are going to be specific to the CPA exam. Sometimes they're like, how do you celebrate? You know, that was one of our topics recently, and that's another area with the CPA exam. Like after you've studied hard for months and you take an exam, celebrate, you know, like have a mini celebration. Even if you have 3 more exams, stop and celebrate. There's a lot of reasons to do it to keep your momentum going. So our newsletter is just filled with great insights, very supportive, and I'd say very innovative, like the work that we're doing to really help the whole human, help their hearts, because a lot of the accounting stuff is just helping the mind.
Yeah, great. Very great. And I advise you all guys to go ahead and visit the Intend to Lead website, which will help you, and subscribe to the newsletter. It will help you a lot. So go ahead and get this gift from Amber. So Amber, would you like just to tell us one last word for the CPA exam candidates?
Aspire. I think it's an important word. You know, somebody taught me years ago that it comes from a Latin word that's really like breathing life into. And so I think sometimes the exam like makes us feel like, you know, it's sucking the life out of you, but instead like aspire, you know, what is this going to breathe life into your life? The designation it's a hard, challenging exam, but it opens up so much possibility for your career, so much possibility for the contribution that you can have in the world through your work, possibility for whatever personal goals that you have, you know, if it's taking care of your family or traveling the world, like it gives a lot of life to your future. So aspire is my word.
Great, great, great. Well, thank you, Amber, for being with us today, and I really appreciate your time, and we have learned a lot from you. These are really great advice and tips, which I am sure all the audience will benefit from, and they will make a real difference in their CPA exam journey. So thank you a lot for your time.
And thank you. Thanks for bringing this conversation international. It's really amazing what you're up to, and I'm just honored to be able to help people. So thank you.
Thank you. So make sure to watch the next interview with another new CPA exam speaker and a new exam tips, advice, and tricks to help you pass the CPA exam on your first try and become CPAs. So make sure not to miss the next interview. See you then. Goodbye.